Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We're appreciative of you all giving us some time this Monday afternoon during your lunch hours. Please feel free to introduce yourself. Let us know where you are Zooming from. We'll get started in a little bit, but we're just creating space for more folks to roll in before we get into the training. Um, For those of you who I haven't had the opportunity to meet yet, my name is Richleen Cadet. I'm the Director of Organizing for Mass Creative. Today, I am Zooming from Boston, and I'm very excited to have you all here with us for this very, very special training that we have curated for you all. I'm just gonna give it about like 1 to 2 more minutes before I get us rolling. For those of you who joined us for the 101 training last week, um, I just want to let you all know we're gonna do a quick recap of that. But if this is your first training with us, welcome. We're really appreciative of you all being here. We always suggest that if you are somebody who take notes, to try to get a notepad ready, pen or pencil. Some stuff might seem very familiar and like easy to remember. Other stuff you might want to write down. So if you want to grab that, this is the time to do so because we're going to be getting started in a few seconds. If you already did so, great. Just keep introducing yourselves to one another in the chat. Any questions that you have, you could drop it in the chat as well. If I don't catch it, my team is on and they will flag for me so I'm able to see your questions today. So, without further ado, we're going to get started. As I mentioned, my name is Richleen. I'm the Director of Organizing here. So, I will be leading today's session. This is our Advocacy 201 session, and we're just going to go to a breakdown of um, how to approach. Um, doing advocacy work in your community with elected officials and or in coalition. So we don't have a heavy slideshow for you all today because we have a few folks that we are lucky enough said yes to join us for a panel conversation at the end of the Zoom so they could give you so you could hear from them what their experience has been like as folks who has taken creative approach to doing advocacy work on behalf of the sector. So we wanted to make sure that today's session mainly highlight their expertise and their experience. So know that the slideshow is not going to be too heavy today. All right. So for all of you all who's wondering why are we doing these trainings, we this year we're doing these trainings like we did last year, because we are doing Creative Sector Advocacy Week. This is an initiative that Mass Creative been doing for a while now, and we found it to be a successful initiative that really bring the visibility of the sector to the forefront of the elected officials' attention. We want them to know that this sector is vibrant, it's existing, and it's having an impact, and that there's a specific week dedicated for them to notice us. If any of the other times throughout the year they don't notice us, they have to notice us this week. So this is a perfect week for local advocates and regional convening to happen. So we are going to be hosting Advocacy Week this year from April 28th through May 2nd. And this is an opportunity for local and regional convening to happen that Monday and Tuesdays and Friday, Thursday and Friday. The reason that Wednesday is not mentioned is because on Wednesday, we actually would love for everybody who's on the Zoom right now to be able to join us at the Massachusetts State House for Creative Advocacy Day, which is the day where we're going to be at the State House showing beautiful art, talking to legislators, and just making sure that they just see how many people in this sector is willing to show up and willing to advocate for themselves. So on April 30th, if you have the capacity to join, please sign up and join us. A registration link will be dropped if you haven't registered before. You could also find it online. Um, if you are someone who's saying to yourself, well, I like to host something in my community, but I don't know where to start, and you want to make sure that like you bridging the gap between the members in the sector that are in your community and the elected officials who haven't had conversation in a while, we're happy to help you do a convening. So let us know. We have toolkits, we have resources, and we have people power to be able to help you do that. So just let us know. All right. So for those of you who were not at the Advocacy 101, a little quick recap. During the Advocacy 101, we talk about who are the legislators that you are going to be interacting with and what do they do. So we broke down the difference between the state legislators and your municipal legislators, elected officials. So for state legislators, we talk about the House members, how they are responsible for passing bill on public policy matters, setting level for state spending, raising and lowering your taxes, voting to uphold or override vetoes. So we want to make sure that we recap on that as well, because as we talk about how you can interact with them, we want to make sure you still understand what they do. Um, we also talk about the state legislators. The state members are a little less than the House. There are only 40 people in the state legislators, and their responsibility is to represent you as a constituent, create and vote on laws, oversee the state budget, confirm or reject appointments. So that's specifically a little bit of a difference between what the state house members do versus what the state senate members do. All right. We talked about what the responsibility of a mayor or a town manager is. So again, these folks are typically the folks who are head of municipal government. They oversee city department and administrators. They oversee city services. They are responsible for city policy, creating economic opportunities, education, public safety, and city funding. These are the top things that they would focus on. Your mayor or your town manager would focus on. And then we also have the city council and town administrators. Their core responsibility is to be is legislative representative for their district within the city, proposing and voting on ordinances, overseeing the city budget, creating, passing, and amending local laws, advocating for constituents' needs. So it's important for you all to pay attention to the municipal folks, because oftentimes the first group of people that you could have the easiest interaction with would be your city councilor or your town administrator, your mayor or your town manager. These folks are more accessible to you than per se a congressional person or even a state legislator, like a state senator. But that doesn't mean that there's not a way to advocate and to reach out to those folks who are a little bit at the top of the food chain. It just means that like you can't overlook the folks who are like a little bit closer to you. And also this year, because it is a municipal election year where your town manager or your city mayor are going to be running for re-election, you want to pay attention to what these folks' responsibility are, because as they run, they're going to sell you their campaign points, and you want to make sure they're staying on topic with what it is that they can actually do. And you could ask question that that allows you to make an informative vote. All right, so I want to get into the Advocacy 201 session today on how to hold an advocacy meeting. And I like to break it down to you all in four different bullet points. So the first thing I want to make sure that you are deciding on is, does your meeting make sense as a virtual or in-person meeting? And most importantly, before you even get to that point, is like, do you know what it is that you want to advocate for? So making sure that you have it clear. Under 101, we talk about making sure you are clear on what it is that you are pushing for and that you are advocating for, understanding your issue, understanding who else supports the issue, because once you get to that point, you are now at the stage where you get to the advocacy 201, which is how do you take action? So you have to decide in these day and age, are you going to have more impact doing a virtual meeting or in-person meeting? If it is in person, what time are you doing it? Do you want to do it in the evening time? And if so, or in the early morning time, what kind of refreshment or things that can you provide for the attendees so that way that they are awake and they're proactive and that they feel like they are active participant. And also, do you need people to register for this event? Because you are going to have to follow up with them. You are going to have to make sure that like the folks who are signing up, you have a way of tracking them and communicating with them. So it's the little things you often don't think about that has like a big impact on how the event turns out. So just making sure that you understanding the the type of environment you want to set for your meeting to be successful. We found that oftentimes that when we host advocacy training or meetings, there's a big difference in turnout before during the time, depending on the day and time that we host them. There's a difference between if we're hosting an advocacy meeting in the evening time on a Thursday versus on the evening time on a Monday, right? So on a Monday, folks are like a little bit more sluggish. They just came out from the beginning of the work week. They know that there's a full agenda of work item that they got to get to. So they might not have the capacity to join us on a Monday evening. Some will, but not most, right? But on a Thursday where everybody know Friday is right around the corner, they might have a little bit more energy because at that point, whatever was not done throughout the week is gonna have to roll into the next week. So just think about it that way. Like, how are you making it accessible to folks based on the day and the time that you are hosting these meetings? All right. Another thing is like making sure that you are communicating with the folks that you are attending, that you have that's going to be attending, what the agenda for the meeting is. The fastest way for a meeting to get away from you is to not have an agenda and just have folks show up and provide feedbacks and ask a lot of questions, but there's no set agendas or set understanding of like what the meeting is going to be about. So creating a pre-meeting running agenda that focuses on the core issue, um, making sure that the folks that you want to invite is there, making sure that if there is a presentation, the presentation is ready, and that there's enough ample time where questions and answers could happen. Because a lot of folks will have a lot of questions and will want to make sure that they are clear on what it is that you are asking them. So creating the space for that to happen. And then also being clear on what you want the takeaway to be. You want to make sure that like at the end of every meeting, there's an up next. Like, all right, thank you for joining on this meeting today. Next up, we will be doing X, Y, and Z. Like again, it's the little things you often don't think about that you can incorporate into advocacy. A lot of time people think that like I don't want people to think that advocacy is just a matter of like we show up at this spot and we do X, Y, and Z. It's a lot of transferable skills you already have that you just need to apply to what it is that you are trying to do. If I am going too fast, you could flag for me in the chat as well. I'll make sure to slow down to make sure that folks are understanding me. All right. Making sure that your meeting is on time, and that everybody who is going to be present know that there are allocated time for them to speak, so that way you don't have folks who feel like they have to rush through their part. Today we have a few folks who are going to be on the panel that's going to be talking to you about the Advocacy 201 and how they approach doing what they do. I had to make sure that they had their question ahead of time and that they were ready and that they knew how long the session was going to be for. So coordinating everything to the second is important, but also making time for folks who are in the space to be able to network is also important. That's why we like to make sure that as much that we do a lot of these virtual session, we do in-person session as well, because a lot of time when you're able to brainstorm ideas among one another, it creates like really powerful impact. So we want to try to to create as much space as possible for you all to be in community with each other. We try to make sure that our meetings are not too long, and that it's not the time that we set is not an unnecessary acts. Some folks might be able to do 45 minutes to an hour, but not everybody could commit 2 hours, right? So we want to be realistic with the time that we're setting to make sure that folks are able to show up and that they're able to participate in our session. They're able to participate in the meeting without feeling like it's too much of a commitment. All right. Um, Another opportunity, like I mentioned in the previous slide, is that you have to make sure you have a next step. For us, we are currently in the process of organizing steering committees for efforts that we want to do this upcoming year as a team, but also as community coalition partners. So as we are organizing these convening, we are making sure that like along the way we are communicating this is what we are, this is what we want to do, and we're creating space for people to be able to add suggestion and incorporate their own idea into our agenda because we are community centered. So we don't want everybody to feel as though like they have to come here and only have to listen to what we have to say. We try to create space for folks to be able to feel like they can incorporate their ideas into what we do as well. And I would say again, like advocacy don't happen in silos. So a lot of this work shouldn't be just on your own. I don't want everybody to feel like they are burnt out or that they have a lot of responsibility on their shoulder. It's important to delegate and to make sure that you have partners in this work that you can count on that can support you along the way to make sure this work is being done and being done right. So don't be afraid to ask for support and to ask and to delegate tasks to those that you trust and you know can show up for you in those moments. Remember, it's important to follow up and consider sending out a survey. And a survey is a great opportunity for your audience to tell you how they want to get more involved. With everything that we do, we try to make sure that at the end of it, there is a way that folks are giving us their opinion, either anonymously or like if you are comfortable to share your name, you share that because another thing as well is like our team operates based on what we know, but there's things that we often don't know that folks have to bring up to our attention to help us be better advocates. So we always try to extend our gratitude to you all, especially when we set out meeting days and times during difficult hours that you all show up for. So I started this meeting with saying thank you for being here today because it does mean a lot. Like this work that we do does not happen if you all don't show up. So whether or not you know it, you are equally partners to us in this work as we are to you. So it's important to just always express that. Don't be afraid to share your with your audience what's next if you already have the idea or how you would like them to be involved in getting moving things forward. Oftentimes, like you may not know what you want to do next, but somebody in the audience, if you are transparent and vulnerable with them, are able to say like, "Oh, that is a great initiative that you're doing. Have you thought of X, Y, and Z?" And then that you can incorporate that into how you want to move forward. So, like I was saying earlier, create space for people to feel like they can be a part of the work. All right. How to advocate for an issue you care about. And now I'm gonna make break this down for everybody in 6 simple steps. Um, as I mentioned, I want to make sure I create time for our panelists to be able to give us their perspective on the work that they're doing. So I'm gonna try to make sure this part get us through. And as well as if you have questions, I'm able to take your question. So there's 6 simple approaches that we try to do when we are pushing for an issue. For those of you who have been partnered with Mass Creative in the past, you will notice that like anytime the legislative session season is coming around, our executive director often sends out emails where she asks people in the community to be partnered with us to be able to do regional convening where we have these conversation with you all to get a sense of like what are the issues that are the most prominent to you in this moment and how would you rank them? How do you feel about the priorities that Mass Creative have for the sector? Is there things that we're missing that you want to bring to our attention? That is the research part that am bringing up on the first bullet slide, making sure that like you're not operating from just what you understand the issue to be, but what others understand the issue to be as well. So making sure you're creating space and you are being proactive with convening local community members to be a part of the conversation is important. I'm pro roundtables. I am always looking forward to doing a roundtable where I have maybe 5 to 10 community leaders at the table. I share with them where I'm at, and I get the opportunity to hear from them how they like to move forward with what I'm bringing up, also things that they want to bring up to my attention. So I am the girl that's going to do a coffee meeting, that's going to do a roundtable, and these are just some things that you could consider doing along the way. Comparing the knowledge you've gained with those who support and oppose the issue is also important. It's not just important to know why you support an issue, it's important to also understand why some people might not support that specific thing as well. You're only a strong advocate when you're able to understand both sides. It's great when you are really passionate about something and you want to push for it, but it's also important to understand why somebody would equally be passionate about opposing that, right? Because you want to take into account any possible like flaws or any possible harm that you could be causing with the issue that you're pushing for. So sometimes it's just people being opposers to be opposers. Other time it's a real genuine concern that they have that needs to be addressed as well. Again, knowing your why as you gain a deeper understanding of the issue and reflecting on how it's personally connected to you and those around you is crucial. As storytellers and as members of this sector, we know what it means when something is pushing someone to a point where it shift their art or it shifts how they operate on a day-to-day basis. So understanding that why, like for us, some of the policies that we push for and we advocate for, we understand what it means to the sector, whether we're talking about creative space or we're talking about creating accessibility for members of the sector. We have created space to hear from folks what it would mean for those bills to pass and what it means for us to continue to advocate for those bills, and that allow us to have a core why to for us to keep pushing for the work that we do. Again, advocacy is not something that happened overnight, but it's something that you have to sustain yourself by ensuring that you are on track with your why and you are on track with why people are rooting for you and are supporting you to keep pushing for the issues that you're supporting. Um, so you have to consider like a question that we often ask ourselves is like, what makes us feel like really empowered in this moment to act, and why is this making us feel empowered, right? We also know like in this day and age, there's a lot of news and a lot of things that are happening, and there's a lot of people who are operating in fear and are responding in fear. But it's important to take a step back and say, like, okay, I'm scared because this is going to have this impact. But what else is pushing me forward? Because the last thing you want to do is to continue to respond and respond out of fear and burn yourself out of feeling or numbing yourself out of feeling a sense of advocating for things and pushing for things in the right direction. And it's also important to know that, like, or is this a moment where we need to hold multiple protests in response to these things, or is this a moment where we need to have conversation with our legislators and let them know our fear and hear from them how they are going to take that on and support us in creating better environment for us to be able to do our day-to-day life. I would say another key thing to take away for as well is making a decision. Once you know where you stand, seek allies and support. Um, and it's important to pull from the side you are leaning against to make your argument persuasive. I know that like for me as a young woman who are living through multiple identities, oftentimes like I'm often hearing people are split on some of the different identities that I live through. But and while I am biased to know why I push for these issues the way I do because of how I live in this space and how I operate in this world, it doesn't stop me from also hearing other people's perspective and sometimes using those perspectives to push for why I am doing the work that I'm doing. So it's important that you are able to do the same and to pull from that, because I don't want to go to a legislator and talk to a legislator about why I think it's important to have creative space without talking about the fact that people want to may not be supporting this because of why X reason, but that doesn't mean that like it's not going to have this impact on me, right? So you want to make sure you have an understanding of like if folks are opposing, why are they opposing, and how you could push forward, how you could persuade legislators to see that your side is more impactful than the other side. Step five, make a plan and get organized. Now that you understand your issue and you've built support around it, it's time to make a plan and how you want to advocate for it. It's important to be realistic, yet remain imaginative. As folks in this sector, one of the panelists that we're gonna have here is gonna tell you about her experience as someone who was a former attorney and then who decided to lean on her creative side more and decided to host an initiative called Knit in Democracy. Amazing. I don't want to talk too much about Eve because I just love the initiative that Eve got going on. And we're always telling people like it's the things that you don't think make sense that really do make sense oftentimes. So I can't wait for you all to hear a little bit more about Eve work and how being imaginative has allowed people to feel like, oh, there is a space for me to show up and be an advocate. Think about the short and long-term planning. What action steps you can take immediately and do on your own, and are you facing a long-term campaign or issue where you need additional support? Um, in our advocacy fellowship that we do at Mass Creative, we talk about short-term planning and long-term planning with our fellow because there are a lot of short-term things that you can do, but there's also things that you do that are short-term that leads to long-term impact, and you need to know the difference between which approach that you're taking. If you're signing up for a long-term advocacy campaign, you need a strong network of allies who are equally committed to moving this issue forward. It's important that, like, when we start talking about campaign, when we start talking about issues that we want to move forward with, that's going to take us more than 6 months to a year. We have people sustaining us along the way because 6 months advocating for something 6 months to a year typically will you will meet a lot of roadblock and obstacles along the way. And if you are on your own, it's going to feel quite lonely, and sometimes it's not going to have the result that you want. So it's important that you are building support around yourself along the way. You guys could probably start noticing some themes in what I am saying or sharing with you all today, which is the fact that like again, the work does not happen in silo, and it's important to build support around you, and it's important to be clear about your mission and your goal and how you want to approach the the work that you are doing. And then, of course, six is to take action. The more you understand your issue, the easier it is to come to a consensus about what action makes the most sense. Oftentimes, we know we have folks reach out to us and they're like, all right, I'm ready to ride at dawn. I'm ready to, like host a rally. I'm ready to do this and that. And simply all we needed was a meeting and where we understand that, like, all right, from this meeting, we need this to change, and this is how we want it to change, and this is how we want to approach it, right? Like, it's important to know what kind of action you want to take and what makes the most sense. Maybe it's calling your legislator and writing a letter and getting others on board to sign it. Maybe it's hosting a town hall and creating an agenda where everyone on the same page and genuine conversation can happen. Or it's organizing a demonstration like a piece of art that demands attention, or even a rally, right? There are just steps to take before you get to that rally state, a rallying state. I don't want everybody to think that like everything needs a protest and everything needs us to be able to like um like write at dawn. It's important that we know that sometime you could write a letter to your legislator, or you could call your legislator who are very accessible to you, and that's going to have an impact. Or if you and a couple people have a lot to share and you don't know how to share it in a way that's productive, host a town hall, have your legislator be present. I'm started coming up with these really cool ideas, and where I was telling people like, if a town hall feels so formal, how about an open mic night where everybody, like, we have it's an easy flowing night where folks come in and they share a piece of art, and then they talk about what it would mean if they couldn't create that art anymore, and they have legislators in the room. It's such a cool and vibrant way to hold something. And every steps that I went over today and everything that I'm going over today, know that there are resources that we've already created to help you all take those steps. So you wouldn't be on your own. So we have toolkits, we have resources. I think I said this earlier in the session. We have toolkits and resources available that if you wanted to take action in regards to something, or if you wanted to host something, we will be there along the way to support. So know that if this is something that if something was triggered for you or something came onto top of mind for you that you want to take action on, let us know and we're happy to help. So we're always available to as allies and as advocate for you all. And we just need you all to let us know how we can support. All right. So that was the last information heavy slide that I had for you all. I'm going to stop sharing my slide for a second because I want to pin our panelists to be able so you all can see them as I tell you a little bit about them. All right, so I think you can see the four of us up here. I'm going to introduce everybody one by one. The first person I'm going to introduce to you all is Amy Bennett. Amy is someone that we work with quite often at Mass Creative. She's a Boston-based media and marketing expert who focus on art and culture. She is a lead volunteer with Art Stay Here, and she is passionate about about advocating for preserving creative space in Boston, and is someone that in the Boston creative community, is known for her work and just pushing forward for more artist creative space. So I can't wait for you all to hear a little bit up from Amy in a little bit. So the next person I'm gonna introduce is going to be Eve Jacobs Carnahan. So Eve is a narrative sculptor who used knitting and fabric to explore theme around Americans' democracy and the rise of authoritarianism. Her sculpture featured birds and knitting scene that invites viewers to engage with difficult topics through a comforting lens of yarn. Recognizing nationally, her work has been exhibited in juried show and featured in publication like Surface Design Journal and Astounding Knits. A lifelong knitter and a self-taught sculptor, Eve was named a 2022 Creative Community Fellow by National Art Strategist for her public art project, Knit Democracy Together. She lives in Vermont, but I'm very, very happy that she's zooming in to join us today. The last panelist I'm going to invite is also somebody how my creative has the pleasure of working with often, Margot Solier, who is a seasoned art professional with degrees from Boston University and Brooklyn College. Before returning to her hometown of New Bedford, she held roles at prestigious institutions like Lincoln Center, the Boston Pops, the Celebrity Series of Boston, lecturer at Northeastern, and since 2017, she had led New Bedford Creative, managing the city arts, culture, and tourism fund, and guiding the implementation of its strategic art and culture plan. Margot also oversees multiple cultural initiatives and serves on numerous local committees and board, playing a key role in investing the region creative economy. So, hi everybody. I hope I did you all justice with the introductions. All right. I have a few questions that I curated for you all today, and I'm gonna go through them one by one. I'm gonna start with Eve, because I just want everybody to hear from Eve, a self-introduction. So, Eve, tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you started with Knit Democracy Together.
Thanks. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me. Um, so my first career, I guess you'd say, was a lawyer, and I worked for many years in the Vermont Attorney General's office. And a lot of what I did was election law litigation. But in 2018, I decided that I was going to make a switch and become an artist full-time instead of doing art kind of on the side. And about a year later, I attended a conference that was about art and science and artists and scientists working together to use art to communicate science ideas. And there were some amazing presenters who had done um, community art projects to communicate ideas. And it really fascinated me. And at that time, I was kind of looking for a way to communicate things about things I cared about and believed in that might have a greater impact than simply by making a piece of artwork. And so I started playing around with this idea of creating a public art project that would use my election knowledge background and having it be a way to communicate things. So I created Knit Democracy Together, which gathers civically minded crafters together where in knitting circles, comfortable environment where I give presentations and lead discussions about issues affecting the electoral process. And while we're together, they make pieces of a collaborative sculpture, knitted and crocheted pieces of a collaborative sculpture of their state capital. So they are modeling representative democracy.
I love that. That is just so cool to me. I just really, really love that. And I think about a fellow that we currently had who was talking about who's a knitter, like she loved to knit as well. And she was just talking about how like she wants to create space around the knitting community as well as the advocacy efforts, projects that she's focusing on. So just hearing your experience and what got you started, I sent her your bio and she was just like, I love her and I'm gonna follow through with the work that she's doing. So just so you can see the impact that you're not only having at a higher level, but also at a local level as well. I'm gonna go to Margot. Margot, I'd love for you to also like introduce yourself a little bit to us and talk about a little bit of what got you in this work and has sustained you in this work.
Hi, everyone. My name is Margot Saulnier. I am with New Bedford Creative, which is a program of the New Bedford Economic Development Council. And we are on contract with the city of New Bedford to manage its Arts, Culture, and Tourism Fund, as well as the Arts and Culture Plan. And so part of that plan is really building coalition and collaboration within the city's creative economy, and advocacy work is a huge part of that. And so over the past 8 years, I've been building in partnership with many organizations, small businesses, individual artists, a network and an ecosystem to support that advocacy work.
Thank you, Margot. And then we have also Amy here. So Amy, I'd love for you to also introduce yourself and to share a little bit of like for those of us who know you, we know the impact you're having in the city through Art Stay Here. I would love for you to talk about how you have built a strong organizing base for Art Stay Here and what were some of the first steps you took to grow the network for Art Stay Here.
Thanks, Rishaline. Hi, everybody. My name's Amy Bennett. Thanks for having me, and thanks to the other panelists, and thanks for everybody who's here. Margot, you and I should talk separately because had I known you a year and a half ago regarding a whole project regarding the Star Store, maybe things might have gone differently. Also wanted to shout out some people that I know on the call, Anne from NIFA and Sharon, who used to work for City of Boston. Um, so as Rishaline said, I have a background in marketing, PR, and fundraising, and advocacy is actually, marketing, PR, and fundraising with other people in a community and in a long-term way. So it was an extension of the skills I already had, and the way that Art Stays Here was born was through. A place in Dorchester called Humphrey Street Studios, which is an artist workspace community. They were at risk of being displaced and reached out to me for a PR campaign. And what we realized is that they actually needed a preservation campaign. And while we did that work, we learned two things. One is that artist displacement has been happening for decades without solution. And two, that while we were trying to save Humphrey Street Studios, we got calls from 5 other artist workspace communities in Greater Boston in the same risk, so that there was a need. So we decided to take everything that we learned and create a nonprofit that's volunteer run called Art Stays Here. We do a bunch of different things, but basically we help artist workspace communities organize and advocate for either preservation or relocation. We have worked with a bunch of different communities and had some great successes, like the Sound Museum, Humphrey Street Studios, Charlestown Rehearsal Studios. We're in the middle of a preservation campaign right now for Central Street Studios in Somerville. And we had a big project at Cottage Street Studios in East Hampton last year. Although it was a great campaign, it was not successful. And I'd also say that we had a great campaign in New Bedford that was also a great campaign, but not successful. So sometimes they work, sometimes they don't.
Mhm.
Um, and that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Amy. And I'm glad that you said that too. The thing about campaigning is that sometimes they're really successful and sometimes they're not. That's not a reflection of the organizers who are organizing these campaigns. Sometimes it's just how things work out, but that's an opportunity for you to reimagine and to navigate what reapproaching the issue can look like. So Eve, I have another question for you about how is educating people about the electoral process for you through needing advocacy related? Like, how do you tie the two?
Yeah. So in a way, I think what you could say is that I do grassroots advocacy. So I'm really educating the people who can be the partners and the people who all of you enlist when you're doing advocacy with legislators, city government, things like that. And I really think that people need to understand the electoral process, just as you gave an introduction about different roles of what a mayor takes charge of in a city council compared to what they do in the state senate.
Mhm.
I think people need to understand the whole electoral process, and that can help them figure out where they have power and pressure points. And then a big part of what I'm educating people about is that the electoral system is not working as well as it should. There's some
Mhm.
parts that work, some parts that don't, some things that are distorted. And that if we all as community members can improve the electoral process, then that'll help us elect people who truly are more representative of our communities. So for instance, some of the topics I talk about in the sessions are redistricting, which when it doesn't work well is gerrymandering, and why that matters, how it affects all of us, how gerrymandering in other states affects us here in New England. And I also talk about things like the process of certifying elections. And so there are these people in local levels who have actually a lot of power over the electoral process. And so as we all learn more about these, we can help make the process, the system work better, and that will ease the advocacy that you then want to
Mhm.
do with the people who are holding those offices.
I love that. And for those of you who are wondering, for as a state organization, the reason why we wanted to include Eve's voices in this conversation is for you all to know that like you may not be advocating at the level which Eve is doing her work. However, there's a lot of inspiration to come to the approach that she takes that are just like too good to let pass by. So thank you for sharing that, Eve. Margot, question for you is what advice do you have for artists preparing to meet with their legislator who may not fully understand the impact of the creative economy or like who may not feel like that they're confident or well versed enough to be advocates in this realm?
Yeah, that's a super great question. So, first I like to prepare artists by recognizing that many creative people are already deeply engaged in civic life. So whether they know it or not, their work that they do is policy related. And when they meet with legislators, it really is a powerful opportunity for them. And they don't need to be experts. What they do need to bring is their personal story
Hmm.
with a policy hook. So, last year when a group of us in New Bedford came up to the Creative Advocacy Day, we had an owner of a for-profit small gallery downtown. We had two representatives of a nonprofit youth arts program and several individual artists, whether they were photographers, videographers, musicians, and performers. And so each of them told their personal story to our legislators and matched it with a policy agenda item that Mass Creative provided. So that made everyone feel real confident going in that everyone can tell, like we can tell our own stories, and then having that policy hook at the end really made a difference. I mean, all of the advice that you gave of being clear, concise, and concrete with your proposal, and then using data, but just a little. So, we did a creative economy report in New Bedford published last year. So now, our sector can go to our legislators and say, look, in 2022, the creative sector direct revenue of the creative economy was over $300 million. And indirect jobs was 7.2% of the civilian workforce in New Bedford. So bringing that data to the conversation, not entirely necessary, but can add a little oomph to the importance of it. And then one thing that we're lucky that we don't receive a lot of pushback from our legislators, but one thing that we like to say is that the arts, culture, and creative economy is not just frosting on the cake, but it is part of the cake. Like, we are a significant contributor to the overall economy in our city, in our region, in Massachusetts. And then finally, leave them with something. So, bringing a one pager, which Mass Creative provides, and leave them with some action items, as well as the artist's contact information and anything that artists can provide, if it's like an example of their artwork or their performance or something like that, that will add to the conversation.
Thank you, Margot. I promise we do not pay Margot to actually say the things that she says on behalf of our organization. Like I said, like we just have like such a great working relationship with her and Amy, who are close proximity to us, that like the things that we tell you all that we have prepared to make sure that you are successful advocates, they're are contributing partners in making sure that you all have access to those resources, or they themselves have benefited from those resources. So thank you for highlighting those as well, Margot. Amy, for you, how do you ensure that the advocacy efforts that you organize are inclusive and accessible to the folks that you are organizing on behalf of?
Hmm. Um, so I guess, that's a bunch of different ways. One thing that I will say, and I don't know if this is like good or bad or otherwise, but a lot of the artists, musicians, and creative workers that have been involved in the Art Stays Here movement um, are primarily able-bodied white citizens. Um, that's not to say that there aren't people of color, and that's not to say that there aren't
Mhm.
immigrants, etc., or that people don't have disabilities. But one thing that's actually been a real um, opposition, weird thing in our movement is that most artist workspace buildings are in old warehouses, old mill buildings, old, like 200-year-old places that, were never ADA compliant and, either don't have elevators, don't have ramps, only have stairs. Like, so that's actually a giant uh, kind of obstacle regarding some kind of certain kinds of access. But, we everything that we do is free. We don't charge for anything. We don't charge for any of the meetings or any of the services that we provide. We are open to everyone in Massachusetts. We haven't really had any requests for, say, materials or information in different languages. We also haven't had any requests for like ASL or other types of access. Um, but and I think one other thing that has also been kind of a conundrum is that the idea of actually having an artist workspace, in addition to, let's say, where you live or own or rent, is that it's actually a thing of privilege to begin with. Um, and, one thing that we've definitely internally talked about is, um, at some point really trying to go deep in terms of what about people who don't even have access to a workspace,
Hmm.
and what is that conversation, and how to see if we can start accommodating more artists with more workspace. Um, so there's lots of challenges even within the artist workspace community. Um, sometimes there's people that have been renting for a long time and pay less than people that have just rented a new space now. Um, Often there's times that artist workspace rent increases year to year is something that we deal with. Whether or not folks have leases, whether they're month to month, year long, or you can leave them. Um, there's a lot of different pieces to space, but you can't even get to any of them without space existing.
Hmm.
So that's a lot.
Thank you, Amy. Um, this question, anyone could take it, but how do you all, as folks who look to organize your community, who can be the who can self-identify as like grassroots organizer, ensure that your advocacy event aligns with larger legislative timeline and policy window? Like, how is the work that you're doing? You make sure that like on the scale that you're doing it is in alignment with everything that's going on legislatively and policy wise. And anybody could take this on.
I mean,
Uh,
I would say, oh, go ahead.
no, you go.
Okay. Uh, it's a super important question because timing is everything when it comes to advocacy. So aligning grassroots efforts with legislative calendars and budget cycles and policy and
Mhm.
any windows of opportunity can dramatically increase our impact. And this is why I know you haven't paid me, but Mass Creative is such a great resource that really the team is amazing in the resources that you provide and keeping us updated on the timeline and the cycle and the education. It really is invaluable.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree that Art Stays Here primarily works on a municipal level, city to city. Um, that doesn't mean that artist displacement isn't a statewide or countrywide issue. What we have found, especially a lot of the work that we get called to do is in a last minute emergency fashion, which doesn't allow a lot of planning. And um, so working uh, city to city and region to region is a lot of where we spend time. That being said, as Rishaleen has pointed out, Art Stays Here is very aligned with Mass Creative. Um, we're taking a pretty big role in Create the Vote Boston and Create the Vote Somerville, which is coming up. And we've also support the legislative agenda that Mass Creative has statewide and long term.
Hmm.
And one of those bills is a space bill. So I guess we're kind of meeting all of the things at all of the same time. We're asking people to help support advocacy on the state level. We're asking people to come to the State House for Advocacy Week. We're helping out with Create the Vote. Um, and then we're also working individually where there is hair on fire, uh, risk of being displaced. So, but timing is everything. Um, but I'd say we're more versed in the municipal area.
Thank you, Amy. Eve, for you, my last question for you is why should artists and cultural workers care about voting rules around the country and even in the state? And how do they have what kind of impact do they have on us, especially as we talk about upcoming municipal election and being advocates and knowing the difference between advocating on the state level versus on the municipal level?
So a lot of people get really frustrated that Congress doesn't seem to be doing what the people want to do. Like you see lots of public opinion polls that say this issue is really valued by people, and then Congress just doesn't even have it on its radar. And one of the reasons for that is a combination of gerrymandering and the winner-take-all primaries we have. And without getting into a whole complicated thing, basically what this translates into is you get districts that are so gerrymandered that only one political party even has a chance of winning it. And so then it only matters who wins the primary and the shape of the primary. There are different kinds of primaries. So you end up with extremists winning those elections. And so they are very far removed from the public. So this means it changes national policy because that's who gets into Congress. Well, how did those districts get turned into gerrymandered districts or have the primaries run the way they are? Because of state legislatures. The state legislatures set those rules. And then why can't anybody oversee those state legislatures, or who oversees those state legislatures? It's state courts. And this may all be sort of tickling your brain and saying, oh, that's why that recent Wisconsin Supreme Court election was so huge. And everybody knew it was huge. The Democrats and the Republicans knew it was huge because those courts oversaw the legislature. The legislature had proposed very distorted maps in Wisconsin, and that is a swing state, so it has all these ramifications. And when you go back to the local level, who oversees the day-to-day pieces of the elections? It's the local election boards. So that's how it's sort of a little bit of how everything's intertwined and why something happening far across the country could have an impact on the policies that affect all of us.
Thank you, Eve. For the three of you all, as we wrap up so we can give opportunity for folks who wants to ask questions out of that are in attendance today, what is one piece of burning advice or last minute thing that you want to share with those who are in attendance today that you would like to share so that way as they walk away they could remember what you spoke on today as well as like the impact they themselves could make as advocates?
So I'll offer something. So one of the things that I really am committed to doing in my Knit Democracy Together sessions is to make them fun and welcoming atmosphere, because that's where you get people talking to each other and feeling good about what they're learning. And by using this knitting circle format, I bring these people together who don't know each other, but they have something in common so they can feel comfortable talking to each other. And I think that that's a key thing that helps sort of make everything else flow nicely.
Thank you, Eve.
I would say from our standpoint, there's a lot of writing, there's a lot of administration, there's a lot of asking people to do things, write letters, show up to meetings, give testimony, etc. So one thing that we try to do is make sure that there's an actual creative or arts or music component to the things that we do. So for example, we're having an in-person advocacy meeting in Somerville on April 21st. And yes, it will be part meeting, but it will also be part art making, part like live painting, part DJ, like just different. We want to make sure that we bring the creative and the art part to what we're doing, not just for the public, but especially for the artists and creative community, because it's probably not popular that I say this, but at least I have found that like doing some of the traditional advocacy work is not in everyone's wheelhouse. And but what is in everyone's wheelhouse is some way to contribute that works for them. For some people, that's writing a check. For some people, that's sharing a social media post. For some people, that is writing a letter. For some people, it's showing up to a meeting. For some people, it's using their creative skills and talents towards the cause. So we like to make sure that there's artists and musicians always up front, and that there's ways that people can participate even if the traditional administrative way is not their strong suit.
Yeah, and I will agree 100% with Amy and Eve. I think artists with what they do are the best advocates with support, and partnerships are the secret sauce to scaling advocacy. So it turns, all of the individual artists, all of the nonprofits, all of the businesses into a resonant chorus. And so and then the cross sector support that we can get. So it's not just one person asking or one organization asking, it's an entire ecosystem of stakeholders who really care about this. And that's why I think we've been successful here in Massachusetts with the arts and culture sector. Of course, there's a lot of work that still needs to be done, but that's the secret sauce.
Thank you, Margot. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate you all sharing your knowledge, your time, and your capacity with us. Eve just put in the chat that she will be hosting a Knit in Democracy on April 24th through April 25th in JP in Rosendale. So if you are a Boston resident, please come to it. It is going to be a great time, especially if you are somebody who loves to knit. Like this is just such a great time and a great way to get involved. I'm going to open the floor up to you all who are here with us this afternoon. Please feel free to ask us any question that you have. Ask the panelists any question that you have. I'm going to get us back to a community style Zoom so that way we can chat a little bit more and answer any questions that you may have. Sharon in the chat asked the question of how to build and keep momentum with their advocacy work and keep the ball rolling while there is so much else happening. And the second question that I'm gonna let you guys answer the first question, which is how to build and keep momentum with the advocacy work and keep the ball rolling while there is so much happening. Anyone could take this one on.
So I'll say it's really hard. I mean, there's so much going on right now. It's hard, it's depressing, it's frustrating. So for me, it's being very determined and also, like Micheline said, think about your why. And also, every time I have an interaction with somebody who, like at a recent Knit Democracy Together session, actually in Rosendale, a woman came up to me afterwards and said, she said this, but she just said, she thanked me for giving her something concrete that she could do. And when you have those interactions, then it keeps you going.
Sharon had a second question, which is how to engage folks who may have had previous negative experience or may be hesitant or anxious to engage in the work. If Amy is still on, I actually would love Amy to take this one on, but I can't see her in the Zoom. I think she might have had to run, but I can actually take this on. Um, for for me and for our team at Mass Creative, we understand that like advocacy oftentimes can cause harm as well. It's important to acknowledge where harm was caused and to make sure that one, someone mentioned it earlier, I believe it was Amy, understanding what capacity people are coming into this work with so that way we don't overwhelm and overstimulate them. I'm never going to ask anyone to do more than what their capacity allow. And I'm never going to create space where folks don't feel as if they can see themselves in this work. Oftentimes, like when we are in this work, we see that like it may not be as inclusive as we want it to be, but we should be always working toward creating those spaces in the capacity for there to be more inclusivity. So knowing what capacity folks are coming into this work and meeting them at that capacity is important. Lately, I've been explaining advocacy as a moving train. And for those of us who's been on the Orange Line in Boston, we know that like we might start off in Forest Hill and some folks might need to get off at Jackson Square, but making sure that eventually folks know they can get back on at another station and keep the work going without overworking and overwhelming folks. So that's the best advice I would give to someone who is dealing with another advocate who feel as though they've been burned before, acknowledging that like that harm happened and it shouldn't have happened, but there's a different approach and a different capacity for them to operate in the work. Hope that was helpful. Of course, of course. Does anyone have any other question? I know that we've been on the Zoom for about an hour, so if you all have, if no one else have question, I don't want to keep you, but if anybody has question, I'd love to address them. Marcel asks, is there a way to bridge the world to garner more support? Almost like one hand watch the other type of deal. Has anyone had any success with gathering more support around the work that you're doing?
So would you say this is a question about partnerships and collaboration? Would that be where
Mm.
this question's
Yeah,
coming from?
actually, so I don't know if everybody can hear me well enough. So for example, there's an intersectionality with, let's say, education and economic justice. So you see these two groups of people that need something. We have children that need education, and we have parents who need childcare services because it gives them economic opportunities. So we would want to bridge those two groups. We want those two groups to see that there is a commonality in what they're both searching for, and we want to garner both of those groups' support. So do you have kind of like a way to do that effectively? Have you seen any kind of successes in that regard?
So I haven't done this directly, but at an event that I was hosting, there was another presenter who was talking about things along these lines. And I think something recently gave an example of at the beginning also works. I think it would be the sort of situation where you might want to create some kind of round table where you're bringing people together around a topic and you acknowledge that they're coming from different backgrounds, different experiences, different points of view, but that they have something in common. Um, that I mean, it's sort of saying the obvious, but sometimes you have to sort of have verification that yes, that's okay to do that way.
Mhm. Hey, thank you for that. And
Another follow-up question to that is how do you get them all in the same space to do that?
I can take that on. Here, this is some of the things that was highlighted earlier in the training. You have to figure out like what space that you want to create as the organizer. Like Eve mentioned, it's like, do you want to create a space where folks are meeting virtually or in person? What will make it the most accessible to folks? Do you want to do it where you have a roundtable conversation, or do you want to do a breakfast conversation with folks? You need to figure out like who is as like this issue exists. You want to figure out like are folks perceiving the issue the same way that you're perceiving it enough to do something about it. Sometimes it's a matter of just sending an email and letting folks know like, hey, I want to do this convening on X, Y, and Z day at X, Y, and Z time in location or virtually, where we could have more conversation about this. I hope you can attend. Sometimes when you give folks too many options, there's this like train of like going back and forth, but nothing eventually comes out of it. You have to be very precise on what it is that you want to do and how you want to do it. That does put on a lot of work on the organizer themselves, but there's a lot of impact that can happen because you are giving folks a clear sense of direction of how you want to move forward, and you're asking them to join you. And a lot of the time, surprisingly, a lot of folks will join you in that work. So it's a matter of like you knowing what kind of convening you want to organize, whether it's a in-person or virtual, whether it's a town hall or a coffee hour, where you have folks sit in the room and you have you ask them to bring their feeling or their experience and their stories in regards to the issue that you're organizing around to the space, so that way you can hear from them and they can hear from you. So you could get that first initial, like, all right, I know how everybody's feeling about this, who are in this space and who is missing, and now the conversation will be, how can we get those who aren't present included in this work? I hope that helped, Marcel.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Of course. Catherine, are you referring to events that Mass Creative is doing or Eve is doing? if you are referring to event that Mass Creative is doing, if you follow us on social media, if you subscribe to our newsletter, are always going to update you via those platforms to make sure that you know if there's an upcoming training. If especially if you are subscribed to our newsletter, we always send out information. Also, we send out a monthly newsletter where we don't only share what we've been up to, but we also share what others are doing in community. That's also really, really cool. So this is an opportunity for our two panelists who are still on to plug themselves in. So please share how folks could get involved with your work.
Hi, everyone. So I would love for people to follow us on social media as well at New Bedford Creative. And we also manage Art Week South Coast. So that's a regional effort here in southeastern Massachusetts. And so that's also where we're posting on events that are more regional.
And you can follow my project at knitdemocracy.org. And I have an email list and I send that you can sign up for there. And I send an email once a month, either talking about upcoming events that I'm doing or reflecting on something that's happening in the news and trying to give some insights to help people understand it and make sense of it. And I'm on social media too. And I think the links are on the webpage.
All right. Do we have any other questions? Margot dropped the link to her website in here. If you are looking for Mass Creative, it's mass.creative.org. Kelsey dropped the link to Knit Democracy in here. And Anissa dropped the link to our website. So you have all of the links that you need in the chat, which is great. I want to give you all some time back to yourselves. So I want to say thank you to everyone who joined us today. A special, special thank you to our panelists. Like, we are so grateful you were here to share your gems, your knowledge, and your time with us. We cannot wait for the next opportunity we get to be in community with you all. Please, for those of you who have not signed up yet, sign up to join us at the State House on April 30th. It is going to be an amazing day. And there are going to be more upcoming trainings and sessions that Mass Creative is leading. So please sign up to hear more about those because we'll be sending a lot more your way. But enjoy the rest of your week. I hope it's a productive week and I hope it's a great and enjoyable week for you all. So thank you for being here. Everybody have a good week. Thank y'all again. Bye.